Hello. Today we're going to enter into chapter 9, which is about the Americas. So, this is our first look at early American continents. We'll take a look at mostly what's going on in the North American continent today, a little bit of what's going on in the South American continent of modern day times. But what we really want to focus on is how did people first come to the Americas? Who were the first Americans, you could say, and how did they get here? Now, one of the things that we do know is that hunting and gathering was the preeminent way of getting food and survival. So your textbook has a nice Interact with History series here about hunting the mammoth. And one of the ways that early humans in the Americas would hunt the woolly mammoth would be with an atlatl, or a spear thrower, right here. And then also they used teamwork to be able to take down these very large beasts. The thing about killing a mammoth is that it's going to give you, a great deal of meat. It's going to give you bones for weapons and tools. It's going to give you wool and hide for warmth. So it really was a prized species. And this is one of the reasons why they eventually go extinct, due to the fact of overhunting. So that's kind of what was going on. Most people believe that it was by chasing the mammoth across what is modern day Siberia to Alaska, that they just walked across what was an ice bridge at that time and then inhabited the Americas. So we'll take a look at a couple of possible theories as to how these migrations would have happened. But most often, archaeologists and historians refer to a land bridge that brought people to the Americas. So what you have to understand is that at one time, the Americas were actually connected to Asia by a land bridge. This land bridge we've given the name Beringia because it exists over what is the modern day Bering Strait. It is about a 55-mile travel today from Alaska to Siberia by way of the Bering Strait. Most experts believe that the first Americans migrated across Beringia. It would have looked something like this. I'll show you a quick map of how we think it looked back in those times. So this would have been between 40,000 and 10,000 BC. We know that this was during the Ice Age, so glaciers sort of covered, as you can see, most of this region here. And what that would have done is that would have caused the sea levels to be a little bit lower, which means more land would have been showing. So this pink version right here, we think would have been land that would have been above sea level at that time. And so then people could simply walk from Siberia or Asia into Alaska and then start to populate these regions this way. Now, that's the number one theory. And we can sort of solidify that based on places that we found that have artifacts that date back to 11,000 BC. In Clovis, New Mexico, we've got 9,500 BC. We've got a place called Meadowcroft Rock Shelter that has artifacts such as blades, arrowheads dating back to 17,000 BC. So we know that if people were walking here, that we were going to find some of these artifacts and things of that nature. The other theory, there are other theories. The other theory is called paddling along the coastline, okay? And we'll take a look at how that one would have worked. That's the dotted lines right here. People would have been in canoes. Of course, back in those times, they would have stayed close to the coastline anyway. And so they're going to go in the coastline. They're going to stop at places for resources. They're going to settle. They might stay there for 100 years, 200 years. Then maybe other people will venture down more southward, finding more vegetation, better opportunities for food. And so this process continues, and the Americas become populated in that fashion. The third possibility is one that's growing a lot of strength recently. It's by boat, and it's called island hopping. This map doesn't do this one justice, but I'll explain to you that from the regions here in the Pacific Ocean, okay, out here near Hawaii, and then down here, there's a lot of Pacific islands that kind of link into a chain that lead to basically South America. So there's a series of islands right here. They are spaced out, but Pacific Islanders, okay, may have, traveled by boat over the course of thousands of years, kind of like the paddling along the coast, stopping at a certain island, living there for a certain time period, and then getting back in their boats when resources are exhausted, trying to venture out to the next island. Some of them may have died, some of them may have made it, but eventually they are going to hit, the Americas. And then once they get to the Americas, there's no real necessity to island hop any longer because the things that you need are more abundant there. So those are really the basic theories that you want to have as an understanding for how people came to the Americas. But remember, the Beringia Theory is the dominant theory of how people came to the Americas. Okay, we're going to continue on with capital B. We'll talk about this again. There might be some repeat here, a little bit of review, but this was going on during the Ice Age. This was a time in which huge sheets of moving ice called glaciers were spreading southward from the Arctic Circle. The Ice Age lasted from about 1.9 million all the way to 10,000 BC. The first Americans arrived sometime toward the end of the last Ice Age, so that would be closer to 10,000 BC. We generally think between 40,000 and 10,000 BC is when the earliest Americans came. Wild animals from Siberia also migrated across Beringia, such as the mammoth. Historians tend to disagree on exactly when this all took place, but like I said earlier, the debate is generally confined to between 40,000 BC and 10,000 BC. We do have some points of evidence now. I showed you Clovis. At Clovis, we have discovered spearheads that carbon date back to about 9,500 BC. And then we also have a place in South America called Monteverde, which is in Chile. We found tools and also hides that date back to 10,500 BC. This is important because it tells us that some people were in Chile before they were in Clovis. That's a possibility. That means, okay, that either the walking across Beringia would have happened earlier, or that island hopping is a really substantial possibility here. Roman numeral 2 talks about the fact that these hunter-gatherers were preeminent. They were the people who were doing this. They were hunters and gatherers, and they were generally following the wild game, such as the mammoth. The mammoth was the most prized species. It did provide over 7 tons of meat, hide, and bones for food, shelter, and tools. As I said earlier in the lesson, they did become extinct due to overhunting. Now, hunters, once they become extinct, they turn to smaller game, wild game like deer, rabbits for meat. They would start to fish, and they would also gather fruits, nuts, berries, so on and so forth. These type of people would have lived in caves or other temporary shelters until the development of agriculture, of course. Once agriculture is developed, that changes the game. We know that that's known as the Neolithic Revolution. We learned about that back in chapter 1. Agriculture in the Americas begins around 7,000 BC in central Mexico. So it is a little bit later due to the fact that people come to the Americas a little bit later, okay? The type of crops that were grown include squash, gourds, beans, avocados, and chili peppers. And then we also have maize. Maize is basically corn. It's a new crop that was grown by around 3,400 BC. It's actually very nourishing and soon became the staple crop of the Americas. Permanent villages were then settled in what's called the Tehuacan Valley, which is just south of Mexico City. And then in the Mexico Valley area, farmers began to grow floating gardens that we call Chiampas or Chinampas. Basically, water would surround the Chiampa, and it would provide irrigation, which would produce up to about 3 harvests per year. So it was very advantageous for the different groups around Mexico to utilize these. They are still used today in certain parts of the world, especially near Mexico, which is a valley region. Now, we know that farming brings change, and this change is known as specialization, because once you have farming, people settle, and then people start to specialize in different types of work, like being a blacksmith or being an educator or a storyteller or an artisan or a merchant. And so once people start to do that, they really start to expand and civilize, develop technology, they develop rules and laws, things of that nature start to spurn off of this movement. Now, Mesoamerica, the region between North America and South America, and then really the Americas in general, lacked domestication of animals. They really did not have many species that were domesticable. When you think about the horse, the cattle, the sheep, these are all from Europe, Asia, Africa. Really, in the Americas, there were horse, but they went extinct during the Ice Age, and they don't get brought back into the American sphere until the Spanish come in the late 1400s and early 1500s. So that was a disadvantage that Americas had, whereas other parts of the world did have this. This is really important to understand because it sets the Americas a little bit behind as far as technology and development. They were still hunting and gathering while peoples in Europe and Northern Africa and Asia were starting to civilize. And so when you take a look at, hey, why did the Europeans come over and conquer native peoples? A lot of it has to do with the advancements that were taking place due to, okay, the domestication of animals. The Americas just did not have that. The Americas have the turkey, they have the dog. In South America, you have the llama, the alpaca, but these are not going to provide you with enough meat to where you can farm it and domesticate it. And this way, you're going to have to still hunt and gather for your food a little bit longer than places in the world did. So those are some of the important factors there. You go back to this map, we're talking about the agricultural production, and you can see some of the types of artifacts that were discovered, stone heads, spearheads, arrowheads, things of that nature. Down here, you take a look at the effects of agriculture. Obviously, we've learned about this in the past, but that's a chart that you might want to study as well. And then some questions for discussion down at the bottom if you want to be motivated. The next section will be section 2. We'll talk about some of the early Mesoamerican civilizations.